Jake had never imagined his life would be anything special. At 32 years old, he spent his days fixing cars in a small repair shop in the desert town of Cedar Falls. The shop wasn't much to look at from the outside, just a metal building with peeling paint and a sign that read, Tony's Auto Repair in faded letters. Tony was his father, who had passed away 3 years ago, leaving Jake everything he knew about engines and a business that barely kept the lights on. Every morning started the same way. Jake would wake up at 6, make instant coffee in his tiny apartment above the shop, and head downstairs to begin another day of grease and metal. His dog, Buddy, a golden retriever mix he'd found as a puppy behind the diner, would follow him everywhere. Buddy was getting old now, moving slower than he used to, but he still insisted on being Jake's shadow during work hours. The town of Cedar Falls had maybe 3,000 people on a good day. Most folks knew each other, and everyone knew Jake as the guy who could fix anything with wheels. His customers weren't wealthy. They drove old pickup trucks, beat-up sedans, and cars that should have been retired years ago. But Jake had a gift for making hopeless machines run again. He could listen to an engine and tell you exactly what was wrong just by the sound it made. Jake lived a quiet life. He had a few friends from high school who still lived in town, but most had moved to bigger cities looking for better opportunities. On weekends, he might grab a beer with his buddy Tom at the local bar or watch a game on the old television in his apartment. He dated occasionally, but nothing ever seemed to stick. The women he met usually wanted to leave Cedar Falls behind, and Jake couldn't imagine living anywhere else. His days followed the same pattern. Mrs. Patterson would bring, in her ancient station wagon that made strange noises. Billy from the ranch would need his work truck fixed again. The high school kids would come by asking him to look at their first cars, bought with summer job money and hope. Jake treated each vehicle like it mattered, because to its owner, it did. The shop itself was Jake's second home. Tools hung in perfect order on pegboard walls. He knew where everything belonged and could find any part in the dark. The smell of motor oil and metal shavings was as familiar as his own heartbeat. The concrete floor was stained with decades of automotive fluids, telling the story of thousands of repairs. Jake wasn't unhappy with his life, but sometimes he wondered if this was all there would ever be. He'd watch planes fly overhead and wonder where they were going. He'd see travel shows on television and imagine what it would be like to visit those places. But then Monday would come, and another broken car would arrive, and he'd get back to work. His father had been the same way, content with small-town life, proud of honest work, never asking for more than a fair day's pay. Jake had learned everything from the old man: how to treat customers right, how to stand behind your work, how to find satisfaction in solving problems that others couldn't figure out. Tony used to say that every engine had a story, and a good mechanic learned to listen. The evening that changed everything started like countless others. Jake was working late on a tricky transmission problem. The owner needed her car back by morning to get to work in the next town over. Buddy was lying on his favorite blanket in the corner, occasionally lifting his head when Jake cursed at a stubborn bolt. The radio played classic rock at low volume, keeping them company in the quiet shop. Around 9 o'clock, the power went out. Not just in the shop, but everywhere Jake could see. The whole town went dark in an instant. Even the streetlights along the main road died. Jake had seen blackouts before, but nothing like this. The darkness was complete, like someone had thrown a switch on the entire world. He stepped outside to see if he could figure out what happened. That's when he noticed something strange in the sky. At first, he thought it might be helicopters or small planes, but the lights moved wrong. They danced and swirled in patterns that didn't make sense. The lights were beautiful, almost hypnotic, shifting from blue to green to colors Jake didn't have names for. Other people in town had come outside too. Jake could hear voices in the distance, people calling to each other, asking if anyone knew what was happening. Dogs were barking everywhere. Buddy pressed close to Jake's leg, whimpering softly. The lights in the sky seemed to be getting closer. Jake counted at least a dozen of them, moving in formation like they were connected somehow. They made no sound at all, which was the strangest part. Aircraft always made noise, but these things moved through the air in perfect silence. Then one of the lights broke away from the group. It descended slowly, deliberately, heading toward the empty field behind the old shopping center. Jake watched as it settled to the ground with impossible gentleness, like a feather landing on water. Even from a distance, he could see that whatever had landed was big, maybe the size of a small building. Every instinct Jake had told him to go back inside, lock the door, and pretend he hadn't seen anything. But something stronger than fear was pulling him forward. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the feeling that his ordinary life had just ended forever. He found himself walking toward his truck, Buddy jumping into the passenger seat without being asked. The drive to the landing site took only 5 minutes, but it felt like hours. Jake's hands shook on the steering wheel. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it over the truck's engine. Part of him hoped he'd get there and find nothing. Maybe a crashed weather balloon or some kind of military experiment. But deep down, he knew he was driving toward something that would change everything he thought he knew about the world. As he got closer, Jake could see the object clearly. It wasn't like any aircraft he'd ever seen or imagined. The surface seemed to shift between solid metal and something that looked almost alive. Lights pulsed beneath the skin of the craft in patterns that reminded him of a heartbeat. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Jake parked his truck at the edge of the field and sat there for a long moment, engine running, ready to escape if necessary. Buddy whined and pawed at the window, sensing his owner's tension. The craft sat silent and still, but somehow Jake knew he was being watched. He could feel attention focused on him like sunlight through a magnifying glass. That's when a section of the craft began to change. The solid surface became liquid, flowing aside to reveal an opening filled with soft, welcoming light. Jake knew, with absolute certainty, that he was being invited inside. His life as a simple small-town mechanic was about to end, and something incredible was about to begin. Jake sat in his truck for what felt like forever, staring at the opening in the strange craft. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. Buddy whined softly beside him, sensing something was very wrong with their normal world. The smart thing would have been to drive away, call the police, or hide until whatever this was went away. But Jake had never been one to run from things, even when running made perfect sense. He turned off the engine and stepped out of the truck. The night air felt different somehow, charged with energy that made his skin tingle. Every step toward the craft took enormous effort, like walking through thick mud. His brain kept screaming at him to turn around, but something deeper kept pulling him forward. It reminded him of the feeling he got when working on a particularly difficult engine problem. That need to understand how things worked, even when it seemed impossible. The opening in the craft was about 8 feet tall and perfectly smooth around the edges. Light spilled out from inside, but it wasn't harsh like artificial lighting. It was soft and warm, almost alive. Jake could see that. The interior walls curved in ways that didn't make architectural sense. Everything seemed to flow together, like the whole ship had been grown rather than built. He reached the threshold and paused. This was it, the moment that would divide his life into before and after. Jake took a deep breath, thinking about his father and what the old man would have done. Tony had always said that when life presents you with something you've never seen before, you study it carefully and figure out how it works. So Jake stepped inside. The moment his foot touched the floor of the craft, everything changed. The surface beneath him felt solid but somehow alive, like it was responding to his presence. The walls glowed brighter, and Jake heard a sound that wasn't quite music, but wasn't quite silence either. It was beautiful and strange, like hearing the ocean from inside a seashell. Then she appeared. Jake had seen a lot of things in his 32 years, but nothing had prepared him for this. She moved from the shadows at the far end of the chamber, and Jake's first thought was that she looked like someone had tried to sculpt the perfect human woman, but had used starlight instead of clay. She was tall, maybe 6.5 feet, with skin that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Her hair flowed like liquid silver, and her eyes held depths that reminded Jake of looking up at the night sky in the desert. But it was her face that stopped Jake's breath. Despite all the differences, despite the impossibility of the situation, she looked kind. There was intelligence there and curiosity, and something that looked almost like nervousness. She was as uncertain about this meeting as Jake was, and somehow that made everything less terrifying. When she spoke, Jake realized she wasn't speaking at all. The words formed directly in his mind, clear as if she were standing right next to him, whispering in his ear. "Please don't be afraid," the voice said, gentle and musical. "I know this is overwhelming. I know you have questions." Jake opened his mouth to respond, but found he couldn't form words. His brain was trying to process too many impossible things at once. The woman, he found himself thinking of her as a woman despite everything, seemed to understand his struggle. "My name is Zara," she continued. And Jake felt a wave of warmth with the words, as if she were sharing not just her name, but something deeper about who she was. "I have traveled very far to find you, Jake Peterson." Hearing his name spoken by this impossible being broke through Jake's paralysis. "How do you know my name?" he managed to croak out. Zara smiled, and Jake felt his fear begin to melt away despite himself. "We have been watching your world for a long time," she said. "Learning about your people, studying your cultures, trying to understand what makes you who you are. But we were looking for something specific, someone specific." She moved closer, and Jake noticed that she walked without making any sound. Everything about her seemed to flow like water, graceful in ways that human bodies simply weren't designed for. When she was close enough that Jake could see flecks of gold in her silver eyes, she stopped. "Among my people," Zara explained, "we believe that souls call to each other across any distance. It doesn't matter what world you come from or what you look like on the outside. When two souls are meant to find each other, they will, even if it takes crossing the entire galaxy." Jake felt something shift in his chest, like puzzle pieces clicking into place. "You're saying you came here looking for me specifically?" "I felt your call 3 years ago," Zara said softly. "It was like hearing a song I'd been waiting my whole life to hear. I knew I had to find you even though I didn't understand why at first." The chamber around them seemed to pulse with gentle light, responding to their conversation. Jake noticed instruments and controls that he couldn't begin to understand, but they all seemed organic, like they had grown from the walls themselves. Everything curved and flowed, nothing sharp or mechanical in the way human technology usually was. "What are you?" Jake asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew the answer. "I am what your people would call an alien," Zara said, simply. "I come from a world very far from here, in what you call the Andromeda Galaxy. My people are called the Veyari, and I am their queen." Jake felt his knees go weak. A queen. An alien queen who had crossed impossible distances to find him, a small-town mechanic who struggled to pay his bills every month. It was like something out of a crazy science fiction movie, except it was happening to him right now. "Why me?" he whispered. "I'm nobody special. I fix cars for a living. I live above my shop with my dog. I've never even been outside of Nevada." Zara reached out slowly, giving Jake time to pull away if he wanted to. When he didn't move, she gently touched his hand. The contact sent electricity up his arm, but it wasn't painful. It was like being plugged into a power source he didn't know he needed. "You are special, Jake," she said, and he could feel the truth of it in her words. "You have a gift for understanding how things work, for fixing what is broken. But more than that, You have something my people desperately need. What's that? Zara's expression grew sad, and Jake felt an echo of that sadness in his own chest. Hope, she said. My people are dying, Jake. Our world is poisoned, our population shrinking every year. We have incredible technology, but we've lost something essential. We've forgotten how to truly live. Jake stared at her, trying to process what she was telling him. And you think I can help with that? I know you can, Zara said with quiet certainty. The bond I feel with you isn't just personal. It's the key to saving both our peoples. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, would you like to see my ship? I think you might find it interesting. Despite everything, Jake found himself smiling. Even in the middle of the most impossible situation of his life, she somehow understood that his curiosity about how things worked would override his fear. And she was right. Looking around at the organic technology surrounding them, Jake felt that familiar itch to understand, to figure out the puzzle. Yeah, he said, his voice stronger now. I'd like that very much. As Zara led him deeper into the ship, Jake realized that his ordinary life had indeed ended forever. But maybe, just maybe, something extraordinary was beginning. Jake spent the next 3 days in a world that shouldn't have existed. Zara's ship was hidden in a canyon about 20 miles from town, completely invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it. The technology that kept it hidden was beyond anything Jake could understand, but Zara explained it was like bending light around the ship so it simply wasn't there. Those 3 days changed everything Jake thought he knew about the universe. The ship was enormous inside, much bigger than it looked from the outside. Zara showed him rooms that defied physics, corridors that seemed to stretch on forever, and gardens that grew under artificial suns. Everything was alive in ways that human technology never was. The walls responded to touch, the floors adjusted to make walking more comfortable, and the air itself seemed to know exactly what Jake needed to breathe easily. Zara's crew consisted of 5 other Veyari, and each one was as impossible as she was. There was Keon, who seemed to be some kind of engineer, though his work looked more like art than mechanics. Naya handled what Jake guessed was navigation, working with star maps that moved and shifted like living things. The others had roles Jake couldn't quite figure out, but they all treated him with a respect that made him uncomfortable. They looked at him like he was important, like he mattered in ways he'd never imagined. But it was Zara who occupied most of Jake's thoughts. Every conversation with her revealed how different yet similar their peoples were. The Veyari had technology that seemed like magic, but they struggled with problems Jake recognized. They had forgotten how to fix things when they broke. Their society had become so advanced that when something went wrong, they simply replaced it rather than understanding why it failed. We used to be like you, Zara told him on the second day as they walked through one of the ship's gardens. The plants here were like nothing on Earth, but they still needed tending, still grew toward light. My ancestors were builders, creators, people who worked with their hands, but over thousands of years we became dependent on our machines to do everything for us. Jake ran his fingers along a leaf that felt like silk and glowed with soft blue light. What changed? We got comfortable, Zara said sadly. We stopped questioning how things worked. We stopped trying to improve. We just accepted that our technology would take care of everything. And then the plague came. The plague was what had brought Zara across the galaxy. It wasn't a disease in any way Jake understood, but something that attacked the very essence of what made the Veyari who they were. Their technology was failing. Their people were losing the ability to create new things, and worst of all, they were forgetting how to hope for better tomorrow. The scientists on my world tried everything, Zara explained. New medicines, different technologies, even time travel. Nothing worked. The plague kept spreading, and more of my people gave up every day. That's when our wisest advisors told us to look beyond our world for answers. And you found me, Jake said, still hardly believing it. The bond between us isn't just personal, Zara said, stopping to face him. It's biological, spiritual, something that goes deeper than either of our sciences can explain. When two beings are truly compatible, they can share more than just feelings. They can share strength, knowledge, even life force itself. Over those 3 days, Jake felt that bond growing stronger. He could sense Zara's emotions even when she wasn't in the same room. When she was sad, he felt an ache in his chest. When she was happy, warmth spread through his whole body. It should have been frightening, but instead it felt like coming home to a place he'd never known he was looking for. But the weight of what Zara was asking him grew heavier each day. She needed him to come with her to Veyara, her home world. The bond between them could somehow help heal her people, teach them to create and build and hope again. Jake's practical, hands-on approach to problems was exactly what the Veyari had lost. Together, they could save an entire civilization. The catch was that Jake would have to leave Earth forever. The journey to Veyara would take months, even with Veyari technology. Once there, Jake would become part of their world permanently. He would never see Earth again, never smell desert air after rain, never hear Buddy's happy bark when he came home from work. "I can't ask you to give up your whole life for people you've never met," Zara said on the 3rd night. They were standing on an observation deck that showed the stars in ways human eyes were never meant to see. "But I also can't lie to you about what's at stake. If we can't find a solution soon, the Veyari will be extinct within a generation." Jake stared out at the impossible view, thinking about everything he'd learned. Somewhere out there was a world full of people who needed help, people who were dying because they'd forgotten how to live. And somehow, a small-town mechanic from Nevada held the key to saving them. "What if I say no?" Jake asked quietly. "Then I'll stay here with you," Zara said without hesitation. "I'll give up my crown, my people, my entire world. We'll build a life together on Earth, and I'll try to be happy knowing I chose love over duty." The idea that she would sacrifice everything for him was almost too much to bear. Jake had never thought of himself as someone worth that kind of sacrifice. But looking at Zara, feeling the bond between them grow stronger every moment, he knew she meant every word. "And if I come with you?" "Then we save 2 worlds," Zara said. "Your knowledge and mine, your practical skills and our technology, your hope and our need for it. Together, we could not only heal the Veyari, but also help Earth, in ways you can't imagine." Jake thought about his shop, his simple life, his dog waiting at home. He thought about all the broken cars he'd fixed, all the people he'd helped get back on the road. Now he was being asked to fix something infinitely bigger and more important. "There's a 3rd option," Jake said slowly, an idea forming in his mind. "What if we don't have to choose between saving your people and staying on Earth? What if we could do both?" Zara turned to look at him, hope lighting up her remarkable eyes. "What do you mean?" "You said your people have forgotten how to build, how to create, how to hope, but they haven't forgotten how to learn, have they? What if instead of me leaving Earth permanently, we found a way to bring some of your people here? Not to invade or take over, but to learn, to remember what they've forgotten by working alongside humans who still know how to fix things with their hands." The idea was crazy, impossible, and probably dangerous. But as Jake spoke, he could see Zara's excitement growing. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked like she truly believed there might be a solution that didn't require impossible sacrifices. "It would mean revealing ourselves to your world," Zara said carefully. "Your governments, your people, they would have to know about us. Are you prepared for that kind of change?" Jake thought about his quiet life in Cedar Falls, about the way everything would change if the world learned that aliens were real and that a small-town mechanic was somehow at the center of first contact. It was terrifying and overwhelming and completely beyond anything he'd ever imagined. But looking at Zara, Feeling the bond between them, thinking about the chance to help save an entire civilization while also helping his own world, Jake realized he'd already made his choice. He'd made it the moment he stepped into her ship. "Yeah," he said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was agreeing to. "I'm ready for that kind of change. The question is, are you ready to trust humans with the truth?" Zara smiled, and Jake felt that warmth spread through him again. "With you beside me, I'm ready for anything." The first phone call Jake made changed everything. He sat in his apartment above the shop, staring at his old landline phone for 20 minutes before finally dialing his friend Tom's number. "How do you tell your best friend since high school that you've been living on an alien spaceship for 3 days and, oh, by the way, you're planning to reveal the existence of extraterrestrial life to the world?" "Tom, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Jake said when his friend picked up. "I know this is going to sound completely crazy, but I need you to come to the shop tonight, and I need you to bring your camera." Tom worked for the local newspaper, though calling it a newspaper was generous. The Cedar Falls Weekly barely had enough news to fill 4 pages most weeks. But Tom had journalism training, and more importantly, Jake trusted him completely. When Tom arrived that evening, Jake led him to the field behind the shopping center. Zara's ship materialized slowly, the invisibility field dissolving like morning mist. Tom dropped his camera and sat down hard on the ground, his face white as paper. "Jake," he whispered, "what the hell is that thing?" "That," Jake said, "is a Veyari starship, and the woman inside is going to change everything we thought we knew about the universe." The next few hours were the longest of Jake's life. He watched his best friend struggle to accept what he was seeing, just as Jake had struggled 3 days earlier. But Tom was a journalist at heart, and once the initial shock wore off, he started asking questions. Good questions. Smart questions that Jake hadn't even thought of. Zara handled the interview with grace that amazed Jake. She answered every question honestly, demonstrated some of their less frightening technology, and even allowed Tom to record their conversation. By dawn, Tom had enough material for the biggest story in human history. "We need to do this right," Tom said as they sat in Jake's kitchen, drinking coffee and trying to process what had just happened. "If we just throw this out there, people will think it's fake. We need proof, multiple sources, maybe even government involvement." That's where things got complicated fast. Within a week of Tom's first article in the Cedar Falls Weekly, government agents arrived in town. They weren't the threatening men in black that movies had taught Jake to expect. Instead, they were scientists, linguists, and diplomats who seemed as amazed by the situation as everyone else. Dr. Patricia Chen, who led the government team, became Jake's lifeline during those first chaotic weeks. She was a xenobiologist who had spent her career studying the possibility of alien life. Meeting Zara was literally the fulfillment of her life's work. "The implications are staggering," Dr. Chen told Jake during one of their many conversations. "Not just the proof that we're not alone, but the technology they possess. If we can learn even a fraction of what they know, it could solve every major problem facing humanity." But it wasn't that simple. News of the alien contact leaked within days, despite everyone's best efforts to control the information. Social media exploded with blurry photos and wild theories. News crews descended on Cedar Falls like locusts. Jake's quiet little town became the center of global attention overnight. The reaction was everything Jake had feared and more. Some people hailed him as humanity's savior, the man chosen to make first contact. Others called him a fraud, a government conspiracy, or worse. Religious groups couldn't decide if Zara was an angel or a demon. Scientists around the world demanded access to her and her technology. Politicians saw opportunities for power and influence. Jake found himself trapped in his own home, unable to leave without being swarmed by reporters and curiosity seekers. His phone rang constantly with interview requests, book deals, and movie offers. People camped outside his shop hoping to catch a glimpse of him, or, better yet, his alien girlfriend. The pressure was crushing. Jake had never wanted fame or attention. He just wanted to help someone who needed it, the same way he'd help any customer who brought their broken car to his shop. But now he was the most famous person on Earth, and he hated every minute of it. Zara felt responsible for turning his life upside down. "I should have found another way," she told him one evening as they sat in the government facility where they'd been relocated for security reasons. "I should have approached your leaders first, done this officially." "No," Jake said firmly. "If you'd done that, they would have locked you up and studied you like a lab rat. They would have turned this into a weapon or a way to get power. This way, messy as it is, at least people know the truth." The truth, however, was proving harder for the world to handle than Jake had expected. Stock markets crashed as investors panicked about alien technology making human industries obsolete. Some countries accused others of secretly working with aliens for decades. Conspiracy theories multiplied like weeds after rain, but there were positive reactions too. Scientists collaborated across international boundaries like never before, eager to learn about Veyari technology. Young people around the world saw Zara's story as proof that love could conquer any obstacle, even the vast distances between stars. Environmental groups pointed out that a civilization that could travel between galaxies might have solutions to Earth's climate problems. The bond between Jake and Zara grew stronger every day, but the stress of constant scrutiny took its toll. They couldn't go anywhere without bodyguards. Every conversation was monitored. Every decision they made was analyzed by experts and critics alike. 3 months after first contact, Jake sat in a secure conference room with world leaders, scientists, and military officials from 12 countries. They were discussing the formal establishment of diplomatic relations with the Veyari, the sharing of technology, and the possibility of cultural exchange programs. "The question," said the Secretary General of the United Nations, "is whether humanity is ready for this level of contact with an alien civilization. Are we mature enough as a species to handle what they're offering?" Jake looked around the room at all these important, powerful people who were asking him, a small-town mechanic, to help them decide the future of human civilization. It was absurd and terrifying and completely overwhelming. But then he thought about Zara's people, dying on their distant world because they'd forgotten how to hope. He thought about all the problems on Earth that Veyari technology could help solve. He thought about the children who would grow up in a universe where humans weren't alone, where the stars weren't just distant lights but destinations waiting to be explored. "I think," Jake said slowly, "that we're as ready as we'll ever be. The real question isn't whether we're mature enough. It's whether we're brave enough to take the next step." The room fell silent as everyone considered his words. Outside the conference room windows, Jake could see protesters and supporters gathered in equal numbers, all of them looking to him and Zara for answers to questions that had never been asked before. His simple life was gone forever. That much was certain. But looking at Zara across the table, feeling the bond between them that had started this whole incredible journey, Jake realized he wouldn't change a thing. They had started something that would echo across generations, something that would define the future of two worlds. The easy part was over. Now the real work was about to begin. 2 years later, Jake stood in what used to be his auto repair shop and marveled at how much the world had changed. The old building was still there, but now it housed the Peterson Institute for Human Veyari Cooperation, named after him despite his protests. The garage bay where he used to fix pickup trucks now contained vehicles that hovered 3 feet off the ground and ran on energy systems that still boggled his mind. The transformation hadn't been easy. Those first months after the world learned about the Veyari had been chaos. Governments had argued about who had the right to negotiate with aliens. Religious leaders had debated whether contact with another species proved or disproved their beliefs. Scientists had competed fiercely for access to Veyari technology, while ordinary people struggled to understand what it all meant for their daily lives. But slowly, carefully, with Jake and Zara serving as bridges between two worlds, things had started to come together. The first Veyari delegation had arrived 6 months after the initial contact. 12 individuals who were eager to learn how humans approached problems they'd forgotten how to solve. Kyle, one of the visiting Veyari, had become Jake's closest alien friend. He was a former engineer who had lost the ability to create new things when the plague struck his world. But working alongside human mechanics and inventors, he was slowly remembering skills his people thought were gone forever. "Watch this," Kale said, demonstrating the hybrid engine he'd been working on for weeks. It combined Veyari energy technology with human mechanical principles, creating something neither species could have built alone. "I haven't felt this excited about building something in decades." The partnership was working both ways. Human scientists had learned to create materials that healed themselves when damaged. Doctors had developed treatments for diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. Environmental engineers were using Veyari biotechnology to clean polluted rivers and restore damaged ecosystems. But the changes went deeper than just technology. Jake watched teenagers in Cedar Falls chatting casually with young Veyari who had come to Earth as cultural exchange students. Children who had grown up knowing that aliens were real and friendly treated their Veyari neighbors with the same casual acceptance they showed anyone else. The shop's old office had become Jake's private space, the one place he could escape the constant demands of being humanity's unofficial alien ambassador. Zara found him there most evenings, usually staring at old photos of his father or reading letters from people around the world whose lives had been changed by the human-Veyari partnership. "Rough day?" Zara asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. Even after 2 years, Jake still marveled at how she could make any space feel peaceful just by being in it. "Mrs. Patterson stopped by today," Jake said with a smile. "Remember her? She used to bring me her old station wagon every few months. The one that made those terrible grinding noises? That's her. Well, she's 93 now, and the Veyari medical treatments have given her energy she hasn't had in 20 years. She wanted to thank me personally for bringing the space doctors to Earth." Zara laughed, the sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Space doctors. I like that better than most of the names your media has given us." Their relationship had evolved in ways Jake never could have imagined. The bond between them had deepened until they could communicate without words, share emotions, across distances, and understand each other in ways that went beyond anything humans usually experienced. Yet, they'd also learned to navigate the very human challenges of being a couple in the public eye. "The president called again," Jake said. "They want us to attend the opening of the new Geneva facility next month." The new Geneva facility was one of 12 joint human-Veyari research centers established around the world, each one focused on different aspects of cooperation between their species, from medical research to space exploration to cultural exchange. The centers had become symbols of what was possible when different peoples worked together instead of competing against each other. "Do you want to go?" Zara asked, though she already knew the answer through their bond. "Not really," Jake admitted. "I still can't get used to all the ceremonies and speeches. I keep thinking they should have found someone more qualified to be the face of all this." "There is no one more qualified," Zara said firmly. "You're the one who believed it was possible before anyone else did. You're the one who convinced both our peoples to trust each other. That trust hadn't always been easy to maintain. There had been incidents, misunderstandings between species, fear-mongering by extremist groups, technical failures that reminded everyone how dangerous advanced technology could be in the wrong hands. But each challenge had ultimately made the partnership stronger." Jake's role had evolved from reluctant celebrity to something more like a translator between worlds. He spent his days helping humans and Veyari understand each other, solving problems that arose when very different cultures tried to work together, and making sure that the cooperation benefited everyone instead of just the powerful few. The work was exhausting but fulfilling in ways his old life had never been. Every day brought new challenges, new discoveries, new proof that his crazy idea about bringing two worlds together was actually working. A soft knock on the office door interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Chen peered in, holding a tablet and wearing the excited expression she got when she'd made a breakthrough. "Jake, Zara, you need to see this," she said, practically vibrating with enthusiasm. The team at the Australian facility just achieved sustainable fusion using the hybrid approach. Clean, unlimited energy that we can build with Earth materials and Vayari knowledge. Jake felt a familiar surge of amazement. 2 years ago, he'd been worried about paying his electric bill. Now he was helping to usher in an age of unlimited clean energy that would benefit everyone on Earth. "That's incredible," he said. "How long before we can start implementation?" 6 months for the first commercial reactor, Dr. Chen said. "Maybe less if the other facilities can replicate the results quickly." After she left, Jake and Zara sat in comfortable silence, both thinking about what this meant. Energy poverty would become a thing of the past. Climate change could be addressed with technology that didn't require sacrifice or hardship. Humanity would have the resources to reach for the stars. "Your father would be proud," Zara said softly, gesturing at the photo on Jake's desk. Jake looked at the picture of Tony Peterson, taken at the shop's grand opening 30 years earlier. The old man had always believed that honest work and helping your neighbors were the most important things in life. In a way, Jake was still doing exactly that, just on a scale his father never could have imagined. "You know what the funny thing is?" Jake said. "I'm still basically doing the same job I always did. People bring me things that are broken, and I help figure out how to fix them. The only difference is now some of those people are from another galaxy, and the broken things are civilizations instead of cars." Zara reached across the desk and took his hand. "And some of those broken things were never really broken at all. They just needed someone to believe they could work again." Through the office window, Jake could see the lights of the expanded town. Cedar Falls had grown from 3,000 people to nearly 50,000 as humans, and Vayari came to work at the Institute. The main street bustled with activity at all hours as people from two worlds learned to live and work together. His quiet life was gone forever, but something much better had taken its place. He was part of something bigger than himself, something that would echo across generations. Children who were being born now would grow up in a universe where cooperation between species was normal, where the stars weren't distant lights, but neighbors waiting to be visited. Jake Peterson, the small-town mechanic who just wanted to fix things, had ended up helping to fix the relationship between two worlds. And as he sat there holding hands with the alien queen who had changed his life forever, he realized that sometimes the most extraordinary destinies really do find the most ordinary people. The best part was they were just getting started. The galaxy was full of civilizations waiting to be discovered, problems waiting to be solved, and connections waiting to be made. And somewhere out there, other unlikely heroes were probably working in their own small corners of the universe, not knowing that their simple acts of kindness and courage might someday change everything. Jake smiled and squeezed Zara's hand. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to build bridges between worlds. But tonight, in his old office above the shop where it all began, he was exactly where he belonged,